This kind of reasoning was taken over in chemistry textbooks at the time of General Zia-ul-Haq in Pakistan. So some of these textbooks had typically something like this. Rather, instructions to teachers to teach from that textbook go something like this, that don't tell your students that merely having oxygen and hydrogen together will make water. That is not Islamic. The Islamic way to teach chemistry is to say that when hydrogen and oxygen are brought together, then by the will of Allah, they turn into water. Similarly, I guess alcohol. But these ideas you might think were peripheral, but over time they did have an impact. Let me give you an example of how they have affected the way in which students think. So this is the 8th of October 2005. There's a massive earthquake in Pakistan. It killed something like 100,000 people. Together with a few colleagues, I took some relief supplies to the areas, to the mountainous areas where the epicenter was located. I came back, or rather we came back in a couple of days, saw that enormous destruction. And the day I came back, I had two classes. In the first class I went, I said, I've just come back, seen all the horrors, and it's our duty, first as citizens, to go out and help them, and secondly, as students of physics, to tell them that the earthquake didn't come because of what is commonly believed, that it was the wrath of God, but that they were actually a movement, there was a movement of tectonic plates, and there's the phenomenon of subduction, and this is how mountains are formed, and this is why the earth quakes, and so forth. So I went on for a few minutes about that. And I said, well, what do you think about it? By the way, this class was a class in atomic physics. It was well, I guess you'd call it a second-year undergraduate class in US terms. Okay, so I asked them, what do you think? And the reaction was outrage. But professor, the Quran says in Surah Zalzala, etc., 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 that God sends these earthquakes because you are evil. Okay? And this is the opinion in the class. And we argue about it. I say, but why did it come to an area where the people are poor, where they have the least ability to sin? It should come here in Islam, but because here you have people drinking alcohol and God knows what goes on in those rich areas of this city. So why did it come over there, and why did it come on a day when people were fasting, and this was Ramadan itself? Well, we argued. Not a person, not one student spoke up in support. Okay, I should have shut up. I went to my next class and I said exactly the same thing and got exactly the same response. And so I was very depressed. A few hours later, 5 students came up to me and they said, Professor, actually we agreed with you, but we were afraid to speak. And so you see that even something like this, something that directly relates to physics, they do not see in terms of cause and effect, and in fact feel that because religion says the other thing, they must reject it. Okay, so sever the relation of cause with effect, response type 2. I must say that it's not just earthquakes. It's on other issues too that relate to natural phenomena. There was a few years ago, I gave a lecture on Islam and science at one of the, well, at the most elite university in Pakistan called the Lahore University of Management Sciences in Lahore. And, well, as an example, I said, at this moment, we have something like a few million people praying for rain, for ending the drought. And if you think that science is something that works, then you have to know that praying for rain will not work. And there was again outrage. And then this went on to the internet, it went to the administration of the university, which was informed that I have been saying things that are kufr, against unbelief and so forth. So that's response number 2. But let me come to response number 3. That response is that science is important, but who says that the West has the right science? We have an Islamic science that can do a lot more. And that was already written 1400 years ago. This was a time that General Ziaul Haq was in power. He had seized power in 1977. And although this notion had existed earlier, but it became immensely popular after he became president of Pakistan. Let me give you just a few examples of that. The chairman of my department, his name was Mahmoud Mazhar Qureshi, a man of great piety who calculated the speed at which heaven is running away from earth and found it to be 1 centimeter per second less than the speed of light. It was a remarkable calculation. He said, in the Quran, it is written that one night of worship on the night of Laylatul Qadr, which is when the Quran was revealed, is worth 1,000 normal nights of worship. So that factor of 1,000 is equal to Einstein's time dilation factor. And then it's right, it's 1 centimeter per second less than the speed of light, so it works. And there were people who were calculating the degree of hypocrisy in society based upon a kind of a Coulomb's law, and they did it for different countries and published their results. And then there was this remarkable paper by Sayyid Bashiruddin Mahmud, who advocated that one could solve the energy problems of Pakistan by simply capturing the genies which God had made when he made man. You see, he made all of you out of clay, but he made the angels and he made the genies out of fire, and fire is energy. And if we want energy, all we got to do is get them, and well, the problem is solved. You don't even need nuclear energy after that. Although he was a nuclear energy engineer, I must say not a bad engineer. There is a probe that is actually patented by him and that works. It's an international patent. And he is, by the way, the man who met Osama bin Laden just a few months before 9/11. He's been in house arrest since that time, been heavily interrogated. We had a relationship which wasn't friendly. In fact, it was quite acrimonious. I'd called him a nutcase, and he called me an anti-Islamic force, and so forth. But you see, this is a puzzlement. Here are people who are technically rather skilled. And if we are to believe him, he was the person who designed the reactor. And designing a reactor is not a small thing. The one that's now producing plutonium in Khushab. It's a military reactor. I frankly don't think that he did design it, but certainly he was the director of the project and had a substantial hand in it. This kind of Islamic science at one time was very popular. But because of its obviously ridiculous claims, it was easy to make fun of. And so it's now disappeared. Well, there's a fourth reaction, which is claim ownership by Muslims of all discoveries in science. So if you go to the websites, if you type Islamic science in Google, you'll get typically an internet banner which says that miracles predicted 1400 years ago, and everything from black holes to quantum mechanics to antibiotics, everything is over there. I wish I had time, but I could tell you about my experiences with conversations with mullahs. I asked one very prominent Maulvi mullah on television. I said, but if everything is over there in the Quran, how come the West has invented all of these and we don't have it? He said, what you don't know is that before a Western scientist goes to bed, he studies the Quran. In the morning when he wakes up, he reads it again. When he goes to his laboratory, he already knows what he's going to find. And then finally, there's a fifth response, and that's a militant rejection of scientific reasoning. But this is reserved for evolution. The times that I've experienced this is when I've gone to colleges, universities, schools, and given my talk, which is titled From Quarks to Humans. It's how we went from the Big Bang, came to humans. There have been times when the organizers have had to smuggle me out from the back door. This is the thing that makes people really angry. But you know, this is something really, I think, recent. Because I've been doing this for decades now. But people in the last decade or so, the last 10 years, they've been responding differently. And I think I know why. It's because of the religious channels, the television channels, which are now taking Harun Yahya, sorry to come back to that, but it's that version of evolution which is being consciously propagated. Okay, let me conclude. I wish I had more time, but okay, fine. We're seeing this resilience because all of us, Muslim or otherwise, see what we want to see. And the question that, Salman, we were discussing last night at dinner, why is it that bad beliefs don't die easily? Why do they persist? I think it's a question that I cannot answer, but I can hazard a guess. Bad beliefs stay on because they are necessary for our survival. Now imagine, I'll give you two examples. Imagine a caveman. Suppose that a caveman came out of his cave and his few experiences told him that there's no danger. But he's been born and programmed and told by his elders or whatever that whenever you come out of your cave, be prepared. Now if he relaxes that, well, then he won't be able to survive. So exceptions have to be factored in. Or take the example of particle physicists. Okay, we have a reasonably solid theory of how different particles are formed from quarks. But suppose that there's one particle which doesn't fit the pattern. Am I going to throw away that whole field of quantum chromodynamics or that area of particle physics? No, I won't. I'll wait and wait and wait. And so even if there is evidence to the contrary, I'm not going to throw away the entire paradigm. I guess at some point one has to accept the change of paradigm, but when that comes, I don't know. So we cling on to the bad beliefs and we cling on to them. It's perhaps the next generation which can accept it. But this, to my mind, is an open question and one that I'd really like to understand better. So thanks very much.